What's up everybody, Brian Goulet here from gouletpens.com, and today I want to give you a quick look of the Diplomat Nexus. This is a new pen that the German brand has come out with. It's pretty interesting. It has a new type of filling mechanism, which is not something that we see all that often. It's not as complicated as it may seem, especially if you're like reading how it works in the product description. You're like, what is this thing? I'm gonna show you in the video. It's gonna make a lot of sense, but it's a pretty cool pen. It's got some interesting packaging, so I'm gonna kind of unbox it and show you how the whole thing works. Diplomat has pretty decent packaging, honestly. All of their pens do, really. We don't show often the packaging for a lot of our pens, mainly just because sometimes companies change it and all that, but Diplomat's pretty consistent. In particular, this Nexus, it's got what I would consider to be a little more of like a display, like a gift packaging. So this outer sleeve is actually made of aluminum, so it's very like substantial. Not super heavy necessarily, but it feels very sturdy. And then the box itself kind of slides in, and so you can really get a sense of, you know, how this presents. Obviously with your pen, it's like, wow, there's really a whole unboxing experience here. But if you're giving it as a gift, I think really that's where it kind of excels. So it's got this little flap, which you can leave in or you can take out. I'll do that just because it's easier to show in camera. Little certificate. It does have some information for the Nexus with, you know, kind of a card explaining how it works. Again, this is another really good reason that I would consider this as a gift pen, just because it's got decent instructions and you don't have to send people to a website to check it out or whatever, or maybe watch this video, which may be handy, but it's nice to have this kind of in with the pen. And then it's got the pen in here, nice foam. It's got the model in there. So this is just more presentation than maybe what you would expect from most fountain pens. And then in this little sleeve over here, it has a little bonus thing. So this is actually a separate little display that you actually pull out. It's got a bottle of ink that it comes with, which is nice. It's the Diplomat Royal Blue ink. Diplomat ink is, you know, it's fairly conventional ink. It's kind of like a washable blue or like a royal blue color. So it's a, you know, pretty handy, pretty decent volume of ink. And then it's got two slots in here for you to actually put the pen in there, which does help when filling it, which I'll get to in just a little bit. So as a kind of presentation item, it's pretty nice because you can kind of keep it all together. You know, even if you don't want to hang on to the original packaging and keep that all that on your desk, because, you know, I wouldn't want to like slide the thing on and off when actually using the pen, but this is something that's pretty nice. And you could, you know, you could put this pen here, you could put other pens there. It's kind of a handy little package, and you don't see this with a lot of pens. So I don't know, it's kind of neat. For other things, other little extra gift items, not gift items, things that come with the pen, really it's this syringe, or this little dropper, which is used when filling the pen, which I'm gonna explain in more detail, but just know that that is under there, and that is something that is super handy when it comes time to actually fill up your pen. All right, so now you kind of get the idea of how the whole presentation things works. Let's talk a little bit about the pen itself, because that's, you know, obviously the most important part of this whole process. So Diplomat's known for making metal pens. That's really kind of their thing. It's a German company. The engineering, the fit and finish is fantastic. They do a lot of anodized aluminum, which is what this pen is. There's two colors. There's a blue and a black. Given the two, of course, I'm going to choose the blue. So this is actually my personal pen that I'm using mainly because it's a new type of filling mechanism. And personally, I like to have a lot of pens with different types of filling mechanisms. Not only does it help me in my, you know, job, so to speak, just to be, you know, knowledgeable about different types, but I'm just interested in the technology that, you know, makes these different filling mechanisms function. And there's a lot of technology that goes in here, most of which is hidden. So I have some like diagrams and stuff that I can show you, but really all I can show you is kind of how the thing works and its functionality. I can't actually like disassemble it and show you all the parts and pieces, but to explain the basics of the pen, it's a metal pen. It's got a pretty decent amount of weight to it. It's, you know, 58 grams overall, which is on the heavier side for most fountain pens. Just the body of the pen itself is 39 grams, which is, you know, probably twice what you would have with most of your standard resin fountain pens. So it's got some heft to it. So it's not for those who like really light pens. The thickness is not too bad. You know, it's a kind of a mid-sized pen, but it's a little bit back weighted. So for those who have really small hands, don't like really heavy pens, it's not gonna be as comfortable for y'all out there. But I've got pretty big hands. I like weightier pens. So this one feels fairly comfortable for me. The nice thing about a weighted pen like this is it feels like it's really kind of sitting down in my hand. So I do kind of like that. And the nice thing about this is it's a threaded cap, screw cap. It only takes about 3/4 of a turn because the threads are, it's a single start thread, not a triple, so it just kind of goes off. It's a square thread too, so it's not really sharp. I know sometimes with textures and steps and threads and things like that, people can get pretty particular about what they tend to prefer and what they don't. Personally, even if my thumb ends up on the thread, I don't find it obtrusive at all. It's not a huge step right here, so it's pretty comfortable to hold in the hand. It is a metal grip though, not for everybody. It's gonna feel a little bit cool to the touch when you first hold it, and it'll warm up kind of as you write with it, and your fingers kind of warm it up. That's the kind of the nice thing about metal grips, but it's not for everybody. And it is textured a little bit, so it has these kind of indentions in there, or these little rings that go around it. So these are engraved or cut out or whatever you want to call it. So they're sunken down into there. So it's not super harsh. It's not it's not anything that bothers me, but some folks, especially if you don't like any texture on your grip, you're not going to love that as much. But me personally, I do actually like it because with a metal grip, my fingers can tend to slide a little bit, but that's not really going to happen as much on this pen. So I think it adds a little bit of value personally in my writing for this pen, but it's just something to be aware that maybe not everybody's going to love that as much. It's got a nice nib on it. It's a JoWo stainless steel nib like all the other Diplomats have. Very good performing nib. I'll talk about that more when I do the writing sample. But overall, the pen it's modern, it's new looking, but it's not anything too crazy. So, I personally feel like this would be appropriate in a professional setting, something that I would not feel weird about using, around other people that don't know fountain pens. It doesn't look too ostentatious or anything like that, but it presents very nicely. And then the other cool thing, it's a metal pen, but it has an ink window. You don't always see that with metal pens, especially because of the way that this pen fills, which is honestly sort of the main feature of this pen and what I'm going to explain here in a little more detail. So the most interesting thing about this is how it fills. It's essentially, think of it like an eyedropper filling pen. So a normal eyedropper filling pen, you would fill the entire body of the pen with ink. Usually pens are not designed as eyedropper pens. There are a few out there that are like that, but most of the time you're taking a cartridge converter pen and you're like putting an O-ring or some silicone grease on the threads where the grip meets the body, and then you're making it to be an eyedropper pen so that you can get a greater ink capacity. Well, this pen is designed from the get to be an eyedropper filler. That's why they actually include the stand, that you put the pen in to make it easier to fill, and the little dropper, which you can also use an ink syringe or whatever other type of, medicinal dropper or whatever you want to use. The best part about it is this thing holds a ton of ink. I think it's, 3.75 milliliters or so when it's full. That is a ton of ink. That's almost like 2 full ink samples of what we sell though. So it's a ton of ink. And the ink window allows you to really see what's going on in there. There are some drawbacks to eyedropper fillers, right? So they tend to be more subject to burping and leaking, especially when you have changes in temperature or pressure, especially related to altitude if you're driving or flying. But that's where the innovation has come with the Nexus. So even though it's an eyedropper filling pen, the whole inside of the pen here is all attached, and it has a spring over here in the back. So it actually moves. The whole thing can move kind of inside the outer shell of the pen. And it's all kind of locked and fixed in there. But basically what that allows is the ink chamber, which holds that, almost 4 milliliters of ink, it allows that to be sealed off because there's actually a rod going through the inside, not unlike what you would see with a vacuum filling pen. There's a rod that's fixed that goes inside and has a seal, like a gasket seal, that seals right at the back of the grip. And it locks when it's pressed down like that. But that doesn't make any sense to do that with my fingers in normal use. I'm just showing you how it works because when you cap the pen, it's actually locking that down and it's closing up, cutting off that ink chamber from the rest of the pen. So when it's in transit and when you're transporting the pen, that ink chamber is totally sealed off and you're not going to have those burping and leaking issues that you would if you were, having another especially higher ink capacity pen like an eyedropper or certain piston fillers that can tend to have more of that happening. This pen, as soon as you uncap it, that spring is pushing the whole mechanism back up. It's releasing it from the seal, and then it's going to write just like normal. So you're sort of getting the benefits of what you would have with a vacuum filling pen, a large ink capacity, that sealing off chamber, but you don't have to do anything extra when you're actually using the pen. You don't have to unscrew anything. You literally have access to the whole ink chamber whenever you write with the pen, and it's the action of capping and uncapping it that's going to lock and unlock that ink chamber. So now it's time to fill this pen, right? So it's got this pen stand. It's got two little holes in here. One of them is just foam. The other one has like a plastic liner in here. And those are there for a reason. So you just remove your cap. You can kind of set that off to the side. You put your pen in the foam lined part, and then you remove the grip. You just unscrews and you remove that. And it's got this O-ring right here, which does help to seal it up, which is nice, because normally when you're eyedropper converting some other fountain pen, you have to like find your own O-ring that you have to put in there, but they've built it into this one, which is nice. And then here you can see the seal on the end of that rod that we're talking about. So this is going to be the filling end of the pen, and the grip, you don't really need to do anything with it while you're filling it, and that's what the other hole is for, that plastic lined one. So that's kind of nice, because if you do happen to have, if you're re-inking it, you know, and you have ink up in the grip of the pen, if it happens to drip out a little bit, it's in the plastic lined part. Maybe you won't get the ink on your foam, but if you're like me, you get ink on your fingers and you get ink everywhere, and you probably get ink on the foam anyway, but it's nice that they at least think about that. So I've got my ink nice and snug in this little contraption. I can set my cap to the side, and then I have my little eyedropper filler, right? And the pen is being held in place, which is pretty convenient. So if I want to fill the pen, depending on how much I want to fill it, I can just fill my little eyedropper syringe. And then all I have to do is kind of put it off a little bit to the side, you know, kind of on the edge, like right beside where that, where that seal is. There's basically open space all around that seal. And then I just keep it standing up there, and I just kind of lightly drop a little bit of ink in there. I don't want to blast it in there because I could see it splashing back maybe, but just squeeze a little bit at a time. If you have a ink syringe, the ink syringe needle is going to be a little thinner than this, and you can actually like scoot that down in there and get it completely past the seal, which is nice. Fill it as much as your heart desires. Generally speaking, when you're using eyedropper filling pens, the more full you keep them, the less likely they are to have any burping or issues or anything like that, mainly because it's the air that changes pressure. Liquid, you know, ink is mostly water, and water is not compressible. So water stays constant at its own pressure. So whatever, the less air you have in your ink chamber, less issues you're likely to have, especially with this volume of ink. And then once you have the thing filled, all you got to do is just screw the grip back onto the pen. And that's pretty much it. It's really a pretty straightforward process for filling it. And then, you know, you're thinking to yourself, maybe like, it seems like you have to have a bunch of tools and all that kind of stuff. Well, the nice thing is you can keep this in one spot. And honestly, with this volume of ink, you're not going to need to refill it all that often. You know, when I travel and when I go places, if I'm using just a regular piston filling pen that has maybe 1.5 milliliters to 2 milliliters, I can go like a full week at a conference without refilling that pen. So even if you're writing a pretty decent amount, you're probably going to only need to refill this every couple of weeks, unless you're writing just insane amounts. But no matter what, this is a really good volume of ink, and you're gonna have to fill your pen far less often than you would with pretty much any other style of pen. So in that respect, it's super convenient. Basically, you're done at that point. The only thing is, with any eyedropper filling pen like this, the ink, you know, at the initial filling, the ink is in the back chamber here, but you don't have any ink through the feed system yet. So really all you need to do is you can just kind of lay the pen down on its side, or you just kind of like hold it in your hand for a little bit, let that ink kind of work down, just the natural capillary action will work it down through the feed, and then you'll be able to write. You know, if you ink it up, screw the thing on, flip it over, and start trying to write immediately, it's gonna be dry. The ink's not gonna have made it through the feed yet. Once it gets primed and through there, then you're good to go and you don't have to worry about it beyond that point. If you screw the thing on and then you cap it, you've locked off that ink chamber. So all you need to do is make sure that you get a little bit of ink to it before you actually start writing, and then you're good to go. All right, so I grabbed some Rhodia paper here. This is the Rhodia Premium, the 90 gram off-white. So what I like to do after inking this pen, just to make sure that it's worked its way through, I just kind of touch the nib to the paper a little bit, and you should see some dots of ink coming through. Again, Jowo nibs are really, really good, and Diplomat does a good job with them. So, you know, it should be able to feed through pretty well, and I've got the grip is all primed, so I'm basically good to go. There's a few different nib options with this one. You have extra fine, fine, medium, and broad. And I have an extra fine on this one. These are German nibs, Western style nibs, so they're not going to be as fine, maybe as some of the Japanese nibs would be, but I find the extra fines and the fines to be really a good all-around nib size for, you know, when you don't know what type of paper you're going to be writing on. But if you're writing on really good quality paper and you like a really wet, really broad line, you can go with the medium and broad and it's going to feel even better. Really smooth, really wet, especially if you're using anything with like shading ink or shimmering ink. That's what's going to really excel. But the blue ink that comes with this, again, it's kind of a conventional blue ink, very like work appropriate, work safe blue ink. Nothing crazy going on, no sheen, shimmer, any of that type of thing. It's going to be relatively easy ink to clean out of the pen. And the nib just feels really good. Nice flow. Again, if you've used a Diplomat Aero or you've used, you know, most pens that have Jowo nibs, it's going to write as well as the best of them that have that. So very good performing nib. This is the same, you know, company that we use for our Goulet nibs. So we've had a lot of experience with them and we know they're really good. And so, yeah, just it feels really good in the hand. Again, a little bit back weighted. So for some folks, maybe that's good. Maybe that's not, I don't know. Most pens I feel like are either balanced or kind of front weighted. So I don't often get to use back weighted pens so much. So it's a little bit different experience for me. And if your hands are smaller, maybe it'll feel a little more back weighted. Might not be for everybody, but I think if you were going to use this as a daily writer, I do think it would be pretty comfortable. I don't think it's just like a show pen, even though it's got all this display stuff going on. I do think it would actually be a pretty good, pretty functional everyday carry pen, or especially a pen while you're traveling or something like that. Might be really good. So, you know, all in all, I've had a really good experience with this pen. I like it a lot. I like that Diplomat's coming out with some new and interesting things. So real quick note, with any kind of eyedropper filling pen, which I would put that in this category, cleaning it is going to be, you know, a slightly different experience maybe than some other pens, because there is not like a built-in kind of flushing mechanism like you would have with a converter or a piston filling pen or even a vacuum. So when cleaning the pen out, if I'm going to be changing colors, I would, you know, dump out whatever ink that is left in the pen if it's not completely empty. You can use something like an ink syringe, you know, if you want to. That can be used, just fill it with water and you can kind of get past the seal and you can just flush it over and over again, at least for the body, or just run a faucet and kind of drip it in there. The method that I usually use, if you don't mind getting your hand a little bit inky, I drip some water in there, maybe fill about halfway, cover it with my thumb, and then I just shake it. And that kind of like gets the water in all the like nooks and crannies inside the body of the pen. And then I just dump it out, and I do that a few times and it's basically cleaned out the whole thing. So if you've got like dried crusty ink up in there, you might want to use a pen flush or maybe add some dish soap into your water when you're cleaning it. But that'll take care of the body of the pen. The grip of the pen, you know, essentially when you have the grip, it's kind of like a cartridge converter pen. So you can use a bulb syringe, super convenient way to flush it out. I don't know if you'd be able to flush it with this thing. Maybe, I've not tried that yet, but as I'm looking at it, it kind of fits over the end of the the end of the feed there inside the pen. So you might be able to flush it out a little bit with this. But just running like water over the tap isn't going to quite get it all. So you may need to like soak it in water, or having a bulb syringe or something to flush it through. If you're going to be changing colors, would probably be best. Otherwise, you know, if you're not changing colors, you probably don't have to concern yourself too much with like flushing this whole thing out unless you really feel like you got flow issues and you're having problems. But given the high ink capacity of the pen, I wouldn't think that this is one you're going to want to use with a lot of like ink sampling and changing colors all the time, just because it's a large ink capacity pen. It's a little more maybe steps to clean out than some other pens. So I tend to stick more with cartridge converter pens for my ink sampling and stuff like that, or like a glass dip pen or something like that. For pens like this that are large bodied, I tend to kind of more stick with kind of one color and then just clean it every so often, you know, as needed, and not change the colors quite as much. Some of the things I mentioned that make it easier to clean, like the bulb syringe and the pen flush and stuff like that, we sell those individually on our site, but we also have a kit, a pen cleaning kit that might be handy as well. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't seen it yet. All right, so very well-made German pen, lots of display packaging and stuff. It's not going to be like the most entry-level pen, you know, so I don't think I want to set an expectation there that this is maybe not like your first fountain pen. This is probably more of that next level type pen. Steel nib pen, it starts to overlap into where gold nib pens start to happen. So the MSRP on this pen is $395. We have it at Goulet Pens for $316. Price always subject to change, but that's what it is at launch here in the fall of 2022. So I feel like it's definitely more in the premium end range for a steel nib pen, but I feel like it's very appropriate for everything that you're getting. So not a bargain, not the pen for everybody, but if you like the unique features this pen has, I definitely think it's a pretty solid buy for the price. So there you go, there's the Diplomat Nexus. If you're looking for a pretty solid daily writer with great presentation and packaging, large ink capacity, and some cool technology, I think the Nexus is worth checking out. You can learn a lot more about it on gouletpens.com, where we have good images and technical specs there. And you can learn lots of other stuff on our site or on our YouTube channel that I recommend you check out. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.